It is my honor to introduce Nana Ayensu. He is a special assistant to the President of the United States for climate policy, finance, and innovation. He's part of the White House Climate Policy Office, where he focuses on power sector decarbonization and climate technology investment. When he moved from Washington, D.C. to Ghana during middle school, he witnessed firsthand how disruptive a lack of energy can be on a population. Nana has over 10 years of experience fusing technology, business strategy, and finance in order to create innovative solutions and differentiated commercial value propositions. And if I may, if you look at the past decades in terms of White House policy, this White House has been enormous for nuclear, but even for just clean energy as a whole. One of the big differences is they've been very technology neutral in how they've been approaching clean energy solutions. And that has really brought back nuclear into the equation. Really achieved a lot of things in this last year, closing a couple of contracts with different countries and really paving the way for nuclear exports as well. So without further ado, I'm here to introduce Nana Ayensu.
People talk about nuclear renaissance. It's kind of a term that gets thrown around, but I think we are really at the cusp of something big. People and businesses across the country are continuing to thirst for clean energy, but we also want new, good-paying jobs, want to develop new industries, want to move towards a new energy future and create strong and durable economic growth opportunities. At the same time, we're seeing more extreme weather. We're setting so many records for all of the wrong reasons. So last year alone, and actually for the past few years, we've seen over $200 billion annually in economic damages from extreme weather. Rainstorms, windstorms, winter storms, and so on are becoming more expensive, more disruptive, longer lasting, and unfortunately also more deadly, so on as well. So the time could not be more important for us to find new solutions and new ways to help power our economies and power our lives. So we want nuclear as part of the energy mix. We see it as a real attractive option for communities to deploy. We want that to be to make that even easier. Of course, it has many desirable attributes in terms of being carbon-free, reliable, resilience, and also long-lasting. And of course, the new wider range of form factors is opening up many new use cases. So not just thinking about central power plants, but more distributed power plants, behind the meter applications, with industrials, with data centers, but also for like rural energy, for off-grid locations. The smaller deployments also open up more routes to financing these projects. So it used to be pretty much not just in the US, but around the globe, you essentially had to have some kind of sovereign or sovereign-like backing the plant. So either like the national government or a large utility backed by a state government or something like that. With the smaller form factors, smaller check sizes, more opportunities for capital deployment and so on that's enabled. And I think that's part of why we've seen so much more interest from the financial community. And as many of you know, just this week, the largest commercial banks all pledged their support for nuclear for the first time. And because we want this to happen, not just for their capital, but we want their expertise. We want them to lean in. We want them to drive more scale. And these projects are also massive job creators. Each plant creates thousands of construction jobs. Vogtle in Georgia alone had 9,000 mostly union jobs at its peak, and I think more than 13,000 overall over the course of the project. And it doesn't stop there. Once the plant is running, you create hundreds of operating jobs in the plant, hundreds more in O&M and services. And there's another multiplier on like the associated jobs. It probably creates another 3 to 4 jobs, indirect jobs for every direct job and so on that you get created. It's not just a volume of jobs. It's also that these jobs are long lasting. Nuclear plants can last many decades. So we're talking about multi-generational. Their grandparent and parent and their kid might be working at the same plant, sometimes even at the same time, so on as well. And that's part of why we've seen tremendous support from many dozens of unions and so on across the U.S. And talk about benefit to the community too. So not just having a large infrastructure project, energy project, produces lots of tax revenue for the local government. But what that really means is that it also helps to support lots of small businesses in those communities, economic vitality for those communities. Even things like the local schools in those areas tend to perform better because of the extra resourcing and because of the extra education and so on that comes along with that. The Biden-Harris administration sees this opportunity, and we are taking lots of action that is commensurate with the urgency and also the magnitude of the opportunity. all of you know the Inflation Reduction Act, right? It's the large, and it's accompanying bipartisan infrastructure law. But together they represent like the largest climate legislation in history that actually provides a dollar for dollar match, up to a dollar for dollar match for projects paying prevailing wages, for locating energy communities, and for sourcing domestic content. It also provides several incentives for clean energy manufacturing as well through, for instance, the 48C program, which many companies are many nuclear companies and so on are already taking advantage of. And speaking of building that supply chain, there's building the equipment supply chain, and as was mentioned on the previous panel, dealing with the fuels, building a domestic and strong and vibrant fuel supply chain. Taken action to ban the imports of uranium from Russia. We haven't done so in a vacuum. Unlocked over $3 billion in new funding to help jumpstart the manufacturing industry. That's just the beginning, and this is just the beginning. But like we're already seeing a flurry of responses from across the industry, all around the country. Whether you're talking about in Piketon, Ohio, this is on track to produce 900 kilograms of HALEU this year. It has lots of room for expansion. We're in Richland, Washington, where Framatome announced this year that they are developing a new metallization line at their manufacturing plant. We're in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You have now Triso X. They broke ground on their new facility to build Triso fuel, also funded by the 48C program. Or Orono, which just a few weeks ago announced a new facility in Ohio, and there's that story by itself, but it's not just us in isolation. We are working in strong partnership with our allies across the globe. So the Sapporo 5 nations, the U.S., Canada, France, Japan, and the U.K. Already at the last COP, committed to raising $4.2 billion of capital across the 5 of them. So you can see we are already well on our way alone to meet that, and there's more of that coming too as well. So if you think about, like, as we mentioned, there are all these different form factors, and we're seeing like an increasingly interesting and robust pipeline for nuclear. So both with the existing fleet, we already have 97 gigawatts of plants that are providing carbon-free electricity operating safely across the country. Many would have considered shutting down, and perhaps were considering shutting down. But one with all the new demand for clean energy, especially that's coming from their states, additional support from the IRA and tax credits and so on that are specifically focused on existing plants. We actually find that many of these plants are applying for license renewals. We've changed the economic aperture and appetite for these plants, and so these plants, which may have shut down after 60 years, but pretty much all of them that I can think of readily are all applying for extension, and they'll be running to 80 years. And there are many experts who believe that a lot of these plants can actually run to 100 years. And it's not just a story about the old, which is and the existing, which is very important. It's also a story about the new. So we saw units 3 and 4 of Vogtle come online this year outside of Augusta. This week, we saw of course, I'm sure we all saw the announcement of 3 Mile Island by Constellation, the restart of 3 Mile Island by Constellation. That follows along, with the announcement of the restart of the Palisades plant as well. I saw Pat somewhere as well. So, oh yeah, here we go. Shout out to Holtec. And of course, we have a new wave of SMRs all around the country. Whether you're talking about Dow and XRG providing industrial manpower in Cedar, Texas, or the TerraPower plant in Kettering, Wyoming, which is not just providing power, but is also replacing a long-lived coal asset, or the Clinch River project out in Tennessee, run by TVA, or the Dominion North Anna project, and so on as well. Both of which are positioned to try to help serve these new load from data centers and from factories and so on that's rapidly growing in those regions. The story about this pipeline is incredible and it's huge, and we are also trying to make sure that the licensing regime, the permitting regime, is also fit to suit. As many of you know, the president signed the Advance Act into law just a few months ago. It's an act passed by Congress. High bipartisan support. Probably one of the few things that many Republicans and many Democrats agree on. But there's very strong bipartisan support for that. And the Advance Act doesn't exist in isolation. It actually builds on several actions that the NRC has already taken to help streamline licensing, to make sure that their licensing processes kind of fit the new features and realities of a lot of these new reactor designs. Like they're smaller, they're safer. It's got different implications on what they need to focus on. Adopting more risk-informed licensing processes as well. I want to be clear. At times, there are some who give the NRC a lot of flack. I can assure you that they are ready for this moment. They are ready to take on the challenge of licensing, permitting new reactors, and ensuring a safe and responsible deployment in doing so. So we see great potential for nuclear and a very strong future. And we've talked about all of these actions and so on by government and by private community, but really, I think that's a strong testament to many of you, all of you in this room. So please, first of all, join me in giving you a round of applause for all your efforts. The nation and the world owes you a great debt for that. That said, having nuclear be a dependable and rapidly deployable, affordable, financially underwritable solution, while that is in reach, it is not a given. There are many things that we still have to do. The clean energy landscape, is much more competitive and dynamic and so on than it has been in the past. Maybe in the 60s and 70s, if you wanted carbon-free energy, and for the folks who are thinking about carbon-free energy at the time, really nuclear and hydro were the only games in town. Now you have many more things and so on as well, but also many more factors in terms of trying to balance that. So there's a lot we need to do, and I wanted to tee up, a few thoughts. When I was on the way over, I was just thinking about what are ways in which there are many ways in which you all can help, but just trying to think about what are some ideas and so on that we can tee up and then use that for discussion. So I think on reflecting, on our work, one aspect is just trying to widen the tent, to try to make sure that there are more people and more stakeholders who are involved in the process. We need to make sure that, especially the nuclear experts, educate the other stakeholders about the new features, about the ways in which really all of the new reactor designs and so on are orders of magnitude safer. And a lot of the risks and so on that we've seen and issues that we've seen with previous reactors, that is not going to happen. Knock on wood, but it's not expected to happen with a lot of these new reactors. So I think making sure that folks understand the safety pieces and also its role as a carbon-free asset. And I know that kind of sounds crazy and obvious, but I think as some of you know, while the consensus for that is growing, nuclear is not universally recognized as a clean energy asset. So when states and policymakers and ultimately then other decision makers and so on are thinking about what to deploy, there is a wide range of opinions on whether you would consider nuclear as an option for that. But I think that's something that can be changed. That's something that I think the work of many of you already has paid great dividends of, and I think the more of that we can do, the better. Relatedly, as a small thing, so my observation is not a nuclear expert. I think my observation, and you all can push back on me and tell me if you disagree, but I think the nuclear industry is amazing. It's super interesting. It's very specialized and quite different. But in some ways, it's relatively insular. You have a lot of nuclear people who talk to other nuclear people, and that is about it. So all of them agree. Yes, for clean energy, for national security, energy security, we must have this. These are amazing, and so on. That's great, and so on. But I think the more that, and I didn't mean that flippantly. Obviously, I agree. But like, but like I think the more that we all see ourselves, and really help see nuclear as a helpful and competitive solution in the broader carbon-free energy movement. I think the better. I think the more that the more that we create opportunities to build stronger bridges with other clean firm energy solutions like geothermal, with energy storage, with long duration energy storage, and also with other, let's say, more traditional clean energy solutions like solar and wind as well, who are more mature and have had to go down, they themselves, if you rewind 20 or 30 years, they were the more niche technologies, not so widely deployed, high capex, lots of questions. Is this really worth it? But now they are the solutions of choice. And I think nuclear is an opportunity to go down a similar journey. And so the more that the industry, of course, the attributes are different, but the more that industry can build off of those successes, the better. In that same vein, we must continue to develop procurement processes and structures that, one, appropriately value the unique attributes of nuclear, and secondly, allow for different and more novels of investments. So on the first one, as we talked about, and as many of you know, when most utilities are thinking about new nuclear or new energy projects, that decision is made on a very narrow basis, a very narrow view of cost and reliability. But I think we need to continue to work with regulators and local policymakers to help to expand that aperture, to understand the values of clean, to think about energy adequacy versus just resource adequacy, demonstrating the power of firm and making sure that those things are incorporated. Perhaps many folks should draw inspiration from FERC Order 1920 and the transmission industry and how that is set up to try to drive more. How that's set up to drive more benefits and so on as well. I think I'll go quickly through the last couple things. So let's continue to novel and iterate on new contract structures, so not just PPAs, but thinking about contracts for differences, construction, contributions to native construction, clean transition tariffs along the kinds that allow more parties to invest in more ways to share risk. And I think a big thing is that we just have to be so much more clinical on project execution and on learning. So while there's plenty of opportunity for new nuclear, I think that there's still many who see investing in these plants as when I say many, there are some who see investing in these plants as somewhat of a cautionary tale. And you need there's a whole spectrum of outcomes and so on across the country and across the globe. And some of those missteps are not a recipe for long-term success. But the good news is that many of them are avoidable. Many of them are avoidable through much stronger project management practices. That's part of why our administration has set up a project management and delivery working group. That's we brought together many of the best minds across the industry and from outside of the industry to collate, elevate, and circulate more proactive ways to ensure on-time, on-budget delivery. So we think that there's a strong pathway, and I'm excited to see folks like Julian and folks like and many other new developers entering the frame. And of course, given that this is UNGA week as well, we have to see ourselves in this global story. Just in Nairobi for the U.S.-Africa Nuclear Energy Summit, I can assure you that the appetite there is for new nuclear is immense for many of the same reasons that people are interested here. In terms of fast-growing economies, a lot of load growth coming from industrialization and data centers, and also a need to employ many millions of young people and so on. So I think the way we can also see ourselves as part of the global picture as providers of services, as just share and transfer our knowledge in both directions and so on. I think that will help. So in conclusion, I'll just say I think the future of strong, safe, and responsible nuclear deployment is in our reach. And it will not be an easy journey. But if we all roll up our sleeves, if we all stay open and get very creative in all parts of the processes, we can get there, I assure you. And I assure you that the Biden-Harris administration will continue to be a strong partner to you all. Thank you very much.